Hey everyone, I'm Gevin,
And I'm Dave.
and welcome to the first episode of Lowlights. So, Lowlights is a podcast about failure and how to overcome it. And on this show, you're going to hear us, two former White House speechwriters, talk to some of the best athletes about their worst moments and how they overcame them.
And Gevin, obviously we met when I was head speechwriter for Vice President Kamala Harris, and I brought you onto the team. And I hope that working with me was not one of your lowlights. Uh, but okay, we'll just put that aside and hope that that's true. Look, obviously working in the White House, working there, working for such an incredible boss was a huge privilege, honor of a lifetime. But over the course of a lot of late nights, a lot of long hours, definitely some lowlights in there, some of which we probably can't talk about.
Yep. Nope. Only for using Signal.
Exactly. The more classified, the more signal appropriate.
Right.
Exactly.
Correct.
But one highlight, though, was realizing that we were both sports fans, we played some Immaculate Grid together. We talked about sports. We wrote some and rewrote some tweets together. I was really excited when I learned, for instance, that you came to the White House from working for the NFL.
That's right. And although you weren't my boss, it was really it was a dream job, And I think that's why I'm really happy that we're doing this together.
Yeah, for sure. Me too.
Yeah, and I think honestly, a big reason why we are doing this is because Dave, I mean, young men are in crisis. You wouldn't know as
Oh
you're not a
my
young
God.
man, but let me tell you.
Never mind. Podcast canceled. Podcast
Young men.
It's
over. I guess old men are in crisis too.
Oh my goodness gracious.
No. Well, all kidding aside, look, young men are in crisis. I think we can agree on that, and it's all the studies that I've seen show that, whether it's things like depression or anxiety, isolation, young men are just experiencing those things at astronomically high rates. And, instead of going out, spending time with each other guys, girls, they're just spending time online and they're turning to the manosphere. They're turning to the manosphere to find role models, but they're finding guys like Andrew Tate and Charlie Kirk when they could be finding us, Dave. They could be finding us.
One of the things that I find just craziest and hardest to believe about that is that, the way that those guys talk, the way that they treat people is like the exact opposite of what I would assume like our fathers and most men's fathers and just like most role models in their life have taught them and have said to them, is how you should behave and carry yourself in the world. Like, you're supposed to treat others with respect. You're supposed to lift others up when they're down. You're supposed to take responsibility when you mess up. And I just don't, I didn't, I say I played sports into college. To be clear, the sport I ended up playing in college was intramural softball, but that is a sport, Kevin. That is a sport. But I played baseball for a long time. I was in a lot of locker rooms, and that's just not the people that I respected. That's not the men that I looked up to when I was a young man. Were the kinds of, the guys who were all about, never admitting when they made a mistake and always picking on people. That's just not, to me, that's not a role model.
Well, let me tell you, Dave, as a young man, I look up to you, one of my elders, as a role model for me in all areas of life.
Okay, great. So that's how it's going to be? Okay.
Yeah. Well, look, Dave, I think a big reason why we also want to do this is because we want to be able to tell stories. That's what you and I do for a living. We did that at the White House together, and we're doing that now. We want to tell stories that actually meet young men where they are, and obviously a lot of guys out there are experiencing these things like depression and disappointment. So we don't want to sugarcoat that. We want to lean into that, and we want to talk about those issues and invite on guys onto our show, guys who we look up to. And a lot of young men out there look up to, professional athletes. And so we hope that all of you guys listening today, don't tune us out, tune in. We hope you'll join us on this Lowlights journey.
Yeah. And so every episode of Lowlights, including today's, is going to have three parts. So part one is what we're going to call the highlights. That's where we're going to talk about what's happening in the world of sports and introduce our guests for the week.
Exactly. Part two, the lowlights. So we're going to hear from our guest this week, Dave. We've got the one and only former Tennessee Titan turned former Congressman Colin Allred.
So excited.
We're going to talk to him and our guest every week about some failure or some setback, some lowlight that they experienced and how they ultimately persevered through it. And at the end of each interview, we're going to ask them the same 3 questions. First, what's your favorite sports movie or TV show? Second, what music do you listen to when you're down? And third, what's your go-to comfort food?
Some good answers already. And okay, and then the part 3, Gevin and I will come back, just the 2 of us, and we'll wrap up the episode and we'll talk about the interview a little bit. And spotlight is what we're calling that section. A few of the interesting things that we heard, some of the important lessons that we take away from that person and from that interview.
Right. Yeah. Awesome. So let's get into this week's show.
Let's do it. All right. First up, highlights. This is one of my favorite periods of time in the sports year.
Yep.
I mean, first of all, the weather's getting nicer. Second of all, you've got March Madness, which just ended. I have something about that. I'm going to come right back to it. Then you've got baseball in full swing. And
I see what you did there.
And then you see what I did? Pete Schreider. Thank you so much. And then
not a joke writer though.
No, just bad joke writer. And then and then NBA, we can talk a lot about the Celtics. NHL, we're not going to talk about the Bruins
Sure.
and RIP Thrashers.
Yeah, thank you.
But all right, on March Madness, just very quickly. So
yes,
in you and I are in the same big bracket, but our individual brackets. Okay, in the women's bracket, I got the final 4 teams correct.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull it up just to fact check this.
Pull it up. All final 4 teams correct.
Yeah.
I got the final game correct. I got UConn against SC, and the tie-breaking final score. Yeah, I believe I put 140, and the actual final score was combined was 141. Okay, Gevin, did I finish in first place in our big bracket? No, I did not.
No, you did not.
Did I finish in second place, Gevin?
You did not do that.
No, I didn't do that. Did I finish in third place, Gevin?
No.
I finished in fourth place, and I am just here. I'm just here to say that there are shenanigans going on, and I would like to formally lodge a complaint with nobody. So that's
and I'm just here to say better luck next year.
Okay. Well, so before we get to introducing our guest, one of the things that people often ask when they say like, oh yeah, Gevin used to work at the NFL, so he must be such a big sports fan. Like Dave, you will never stop talking about the Red Sox. Fenway is the background of your phone. You grew up near Fenway in Boston. Yada yada yada. How much can you possibly know about these sports? So, Gevin, surprise. Going to give you a short quiz. Now, one of the best Super Bowls in the history of Super Bowls.
I already know where this is going.
Yeah. I want to bring you back to a wonderful day.
And it's a Super Bowl that I don't think I even remember. But anyway,
I want to bring you back to a wonderful day, Gevin. It was early in 2017. It was Super Bowl 51. The New England Patriots are playing the Atlanta Falcons. And I'm going to ask you some questions about a wonderful game that I feel like we don't talk about enough. And frankly, if you wanted to spend the rest of this podcast talking about, I'd be there for it. But Gevin,
yes,
there were 7 Atlanta Falcons who caught passes from Boston College's own Matt Ryan in that game. Name 5 of them.
Well, I'm going to preface this again by saying I don't recall the Super Bowl in particular, but for the sake of this show, I'll do my best, and I'm very happy that I was not asked this question in my job interview to work at the NFL or to work with you at the White House.
In hindsight, a mistake.
Right. Okay. Let's start with the easy one, Julio Jones.
Number 1, obviously. That fourth quarter catch when the Pats were only, I think we were at that point down 28-20. That fourth quarter catch on the sideline, one of the top catches I've ever seen in the Super Bowl. Bar none.
If you want to talk about top catches in the Super Bowl, you want to talk about David Tyree?
No, I don't actually. Nope. Again, those...
Right. 2 can play this game.
And in fact, we won't be. Let's move on.
Okay. So we got Julio Jones. I I recall a certain Mohamed Sanu catching a
Boom,
pass in
number
that
2.
Super
Yep,
Bowl.
correct. Caught 2
Okay, that's
passes in
number
that game.
2.
Yep.
I went to training camp one day. I remember, I don't know if I got a fist bump, but I got a hey from Mohamed
Well,
Sanu, so that was cool.
you got a hey
That was
from
cool.
Mohamed Sanu?
I got a hey.
Wow.
I got a hey. He was playing with his son. It was really
also
cute.
Former,
yeah, it was really cute.
Also former New England Patriot. But
Former
go
New
on.
England Patriot. That's right. That's right. How do you do with you guys?
But go on.
Okay, didn't catch a pass in a Super Bowl. That's what I thought. Hey, Austin Hooper.
Another
That's right.
former Falcon
Austin,
and current New England Patriot. Yep. Austin Hooper, tight end. Yep, that's right.
Former Cleveland Brown as well.
I can give you a hint. There are not just tight ends and wide receivers who caught passes for the Falcons in this game.
Did we have perhaps an offensive lineman or something like that?
Close. Close.
I'm going to go with a running back here.
Yes.
And based on that year, I'm going to say Devontae Freeman.
Boom. Number 4. Yes, that's correct.
Okay. All right.
He was a beast. He was a beast, especially in that first half.
Yeah, he was.
He was a beast
absolutely.
in that game.
That man was he had a motor for legs. And Taylor Gabriel.
Taylor Gabriel
is
not who I thought you were going to go. I'll be honest, I don't even know who that is. No offense, Taylor Gabriel.
Mm-hmm.
I do not remember him.
There you go.
Yeah, I thought you were going to go. But there you go. Yes, correct. All right, you got it. Nailed
Falcons fan card secured.
Huh?
Don't ask me to name a 6th or the 7th.
Okay. Tournament's fair play.
Yep. All right. So that's 5. Is that 5?
Yeah. That's it. You nailed it.
Okay. All right. I got a question for you, sir.
Hit me.
Can you name the top 5 home run leaders for the Boston Red Sox? In your Boston Red Sox jersey, I might add. No pressure.
Okay, but to be fair, this is a Pedro Martinez jersey, number 45. It's got the 99 All-Star Game patch on it.
Okay.
And I think you will find that Pedro Martinez, despite being one of the best baseball pitchers ever, is not on the list of home run hitters.
Fair. And let me just say, for those getting to know us at home, I am not a baseball person. So you're going to hear Dave talk a lot about baseball. And most of what he's going to say will be teaching me.
Yeah, but by the end of this, Gevin will be just as big a baseball fan as I am.
I'm open to it. I enjoy going to baseball games. I
mean, look, I will say, of the franchises in Atlanta, the Atlanta Braves is a pretty good baseball team to get to root for. They have been pretty successful.
Braves had
in fact, do you know in what city the Atlanta Braves franchise was birthed and played for many decades?
Boston.
Correct.
I knew that.
Yeah,
I knew that. That's some good Atlanta
exactly
trivia.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Their old stadium is on BU campus, Boston University campus.
Wow.
Okay,
but they just had to go down to Atlanta, the city where the players play.
Look, everybody makes mistakes. All right. Okay, I'm buying myself some time here. All right, number one's got to be the kid, Ted Williams. Got to be, of course.
Obviously. Yeah, number 1. You got it.
And imagine how many more home runs he would have hit if he hadn't left in the prime of his career for World War II and then again for the Korean War. Fully ridiculous. Okay, number 2, I'm going to say got to be Big Papi.
Big Papi, David Ortiz. I know who that is.
Obviously, 3-time World Series. Yeah, I was going to say, you know who that is. Right. Everyone knows who that is.
I know who that is.
3-time World Series champion. David Ortiz. Love that guy.
Yep.
I'm going to say another Hall of Famer, Jim Rice.
Jim Rice.
Boom.
Jim Rice is on the list. He's number 4. So you've got 1, 2, and 4. 3 and 5 still to go.
Somebody who played for the Red Sox for Carl Yastrzemski.
Number 3.
Boom.
That's the Carl.
Yes.
Yep.
Won a triple crown. That means led the league in average home runs and RBI in 67.
Wow.
And the last one, number 5. So my options here are going to be either Jimmy Fox, who played way back in the day with Ted Williams. Yeah. He's the guy on. Did you see Tom Hanks in League of Their Own? He's the guy that he was. I don't know if you saw that movie, but he's the guy that great movie. But he's the guy that the Tom Hanks character was based on. Or Dewey Evans, right fielder, Dwight Evans. He played forever. All right, I'm going to say
choose wisely.
I'm going to say Evans.
Choose wisely.
Dwight Evans.
Final answer.
Final answer.
You got it. You are
Let's go.
the Lowlights millionaire.
I'll be picking up that check. If you notice, I'm not going to throw a day. All right, that's great.
I would have gone with Manny
Yeah,
Ramirez. That's a
see,
name I know. He's number 6.
of course. See, it's funny.
Yeah.
I was actually thinking about
Yeah.
Manny too. I honestly just didn't think he played long enough to be on that list because he was here.
Fair.
His first year was like 2000, and his last year was probably 08.
Right.
Something like that, maybe 9. So, anyway, so I was going back and forth. So, okay, but that's good. Love Manny.
Yeah.
Love Manny.
No, good job.
Yeah.
5 out of 5.
Hey, both of us. All right, our position on this podcast is secure. I can keep the jersey on.
Yes, you can. Yes, please. For those watching on YouTube, please keep the jersey on, Dave. Please keep the shirt on. Okay, Dave. I think we've done enough of this. Let's get into introducing this week's guest, huh?
All right.
Cool. So Colin Allred, Dave, we mentioned a few minutes ago, is the first Lowlights guest. I think that's huge. It's very special. We're gonna have a T-shirt or a hat or something made for him. But Colin Allred might not be a name that people knew during his playing career. I'll say that. But I think Colin Allred is probably one of the most impressive guys to have ever played in the NFL. And it's not because of what he did on the field necessarily, more so what he's done off the field and actually after he left the NFL. So as a quick, overview for those who might not be as familiar with Colin Allred, at least as a former NFL player, he was a standout player at Baylor. He's from Texas, but he went undrafted in the 2006 draft, which was really difficult, obviously. But he ended up signing with the Tennessee Titans shortly after the draft, and he played for them for almost 5 years. But he had a really terrible neck injury that eventually forced him to retire. But even when that door closed, another one opened, and he made, I guess, what didn't end up being as big a mistake as it was maybe for you. He went to law school. He became a lawyer. And then he worked in the Obama administration and decided to serve his community by running for office. And he actually ousted an incumbent congressman back in 2018 to become the U.S. representative for Texas's 32nd district. And he served for, let's say, 3 terms. Before deciding to take on America's favorite senator, one Ted Cruz.
Exactly right.
And unfortunately, it did not work out. This was last November, but we're so fortunate and grateful that Colin has chosen to join us for our first episode.
And I'm really I love this interview and getting to talk to Colin. I just think for anybody out there who who wants to point at a role model, who wants to tell anybody. Any young person, but especially a young man, this is who you want to be like. This is who you want to emulate. This is the kind of leader that you want to serve alongside if you're, in public service, or that you want to play with if you're on a team. This is somebody who makes people around him better. This is somebody who's kind, who's generous, who's inspiring, and who's authentic. Who clearly, when you hear him talk, like you can just tell he did this for the right reason. He wants to serve people. He wants to make their life better. So anyway, I just think I couldn't imagine a better person to kick us off and to share some pearls of wisdom.
I agree. And like we said earlier, there's going to be the part 3 to the episode. That's the spotlight. So Dave and I are going to come back on after our interview with Colin, and we're going to, debrief a little bit.
All right. So see you on the other side.
All right. Well, we are thrilled to welcome the first guest on Lowlights. We're going to get you a T-shirt or something, Colin, or a hat or something like that. Former Titans linebacker, former congressman, and perhaps future senator, Colin Allred. Thank you so much for joining Lowlights.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I didn't know I was the first guest. That's great.
First guest. Just don't back out. Come on, please. We got you.
And I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
All right. Well, so to start off, I think I first really became aware of you when you ran for Congress. And I think a lot of our listeners know about you because of your political career. But of course, before you were in politics, you were doing something pretty interesting. You were in the NFL and you were a linebacker with Tennessee Titans. So we wanted to start there and hear a little bit about your NFL career. I mean, we know that you went to Hillcrest High School, which I think is known for being a sort of scrappy underdog, beating some of those Titans of Texas football in the playoffs. And then you went on to Baylor. You were an outstanding college linebacker, and so we wanted to hear a little bit about that and about your transition to the NFL and, what that was like. I mean, this is a podcast where people, we get some of the best athletes in the country on to talk about not just highlights, but also lowlights. So we're just interested to hear about what that was like for you.
Yeah. Well, listen, I went to Baylor at a time when we weren't that good, right? And I got to be captain of the team, and I think we turned things around pretty well by the time my senior year came, where we finished 5-7, which was the best record we'd had, and we'd lost 2 games in double overtime on the road against ranked opponents. That was the year that UT won the title with Vince.
Right.
And the Big 12 was, just full of just great teams at the time, whether it was Nebraska and Colorado in the north, or Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, Texas, Texas A&M, Texas Tech. They were all ranked in the south, and little Baylor just wasn't really on the same level. And so, my kind of ethos was, well, if we're not going to be as talented as them, we're going to have to outwork them.
Right.
And so I instituted like a attendance policy for summer workouts, because summer workouts hadn't been that well attended, and we ended up being, I think a team that was a difficult out, right? And at that time, coming out of Baylor, we just did not have very many players who were going to the NFL. Even though I do think that we had some NFL talent, I think it was just hard to see, because in the previous years we'd been so bad, it was almost hard to see the talent. And so I had been convinced by these agents who kept calling me, telling me that I had a chance to play in the NFL, to give it a shot. I wasn't going to try to play in the NFL. I'd got into law school. I was going to go to law school, and I had been admitted, and I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. But they convinced me that I had a shot. In fact, they had to send me my draft report that said I was likely 5th to 7th round pick. So that's the last 3 rounds. And that I said, okay, I'll give it a shot. And so I trained for the draft. I wasn't invited to the combine. And then I went undrafted. But I was what was called a priority free agent, meaning that as soon as the draft is over, teams start calling all the guys who didn't get drafted. And really, in the final few rounds, it's not that different if you're 6th, 7th round pick versus being a priority free agent. Also, you get to choose where you go. And I chose the Cowboys called and then offered me, and I was going to go to the Cowboys. And that was a big deal for me as a Dallas kid. And, the linebacker coach had stayed in touch with me in the weeks before the draft, and I thought they were going to draft me or sign me. And then when they called, I thought that was expected. And then Jerry pulled the offer, and I think they gave it to someone else. I ended up falling back on my second option, which was the Tennessee Titans, even though they had just drafted 3 linebackers in that draft, because the scout he was a Hall of Fame scout eventually. His name was C.O. Mercado, who used to be the Oilers head scout and then the Titans. He was like, listen, you can beat them. You can beat them out. And so I went to the Titans as an undrafted free agent, 3 drafted linebackers ahead of me. There's about 12 linebackers already there, maybe give or take, maybe 10. And, 6, maybe 7 were going to make the team, right? And I had a great training camp and off season, but I got cut at the end of the training camp. It was one of those things where I probably shouldn't have been, but the GM was known for wanting to keep his draft picks. He kept all 3 draft picks, and I got cut. And I went home, and I missed the window to go to law school, and I started working at my local YMCA and just getting ready to go to law school the next year. And then the GM got fired, and the next day they re-signed me, and I stayed with them for the next 4 years. And that's kind of how my entry into the NFL went. Was that it was pretty rocky, but it was one of those things where it performed well. Just didn't quite get the result I deserved, but stayed in shape, stayed ready, and then I was able to make it.
It's just so interesting, because I think for most people listening to this podcast, the idea of, oh my goodness, you played in the NFL, that must have been the ultimate highlight of your life and of your career. I mean, that's what most kids dream of, right? And yet here you are. You're a standout college player. You've got these agents telling you you're going to make it in the NFL. And first you have to deal with going undrafted. And then you have to deal with getting cut at the end of training camp when you feel like you played well enough to make the team. So I just think it's interesting that your experience that was a little different than what you'd sort of imagine it would be. Making the NFL, it seems like, oh, that's just like such a highlight of your life. But it sounds like you were able to stay positive, even despite the fact that there were some setbacks there. Is that right?
Well, I think sometimes I'll talk to young people and they'll say, oh man, you were so lucky. And I'll say, No, luck is not the right word. Although I have a belief that, luck is preparation and opportunity coming together, right? And it's certainly true that I was fortunate that I didn't get injured, that although my career ended with an injury, but that I stayed healthy. I played with so many guys who I thought were better than me over the years. But I do think that when you go through that kind of a path into something that's really hard, that you have a greater appreciation for it, but also you learn something about yourself, right? So every training camp, and I still see this from other people. I was watching the F1 Netflix documentary thing,
Sure.
Drive to
Formula
Survive.
One racing.
Yeah, well, they're talking about the other driver and who's behind me and all this stuff. And one of the guys, he keeps asking, where's the guy who I'm competing with? And they're saying, don't worry about him, just do your race. And that's just a classic mistake. It's not you versus him. It's you versus you. Like it really is. It always is. In every single thing in life. If you do your best, either you'll have the outcome you wanted or you'll get a different outcome that will be better than you would have expected. Right? So even though I didn't make the team, I had done well enough that it didn't matter, that I got cut. I was in a good enough position to come back or to go to law school with my head held high and say, hey, listen, I can play in the NFL. It just didn't work out this time. Right? And in every training camp, I developed this kind of ability. I went to 5 training camps in a row with the same team, which is unusual for an undrafted guy. I would have kept playing, but I got hurt. I'd go into every training camp, though, with my own goals, focus on myself. Didn't matter who they drafted, didn't matter who they'd signed in free agency. Every year I had to make the team again. Every year I was on the bubble. But I knew if I did my thing, and if I was the best version of myself, then I would be fine. And that's what I try and tell young people all the time is whatever you're competing in, whatever you're trying to do, it's not really about who else is involved. It's all about you. It's all about you versus you being the best version of yourself. And even if you don't get that golden ring, you'll probably hit something else or learn something else that will have prepared you for the next thing.
Colin, how long did it take you to realize that? Because I've gone back and I've listened to interviews that you gave in the locker room back during those training camps, and the same sense of optimism and humility and gratitude that I hear from you now it's the same that I heard from you back then, but I imagine it wasn't that easy. So, when did you sort of have this realization? And can you talk to us a little bit about what it was like in the moment when you were going through the ups and downs of your NFL career?
Well, I think sports in general has a lot of benefits, but the mental toughness and the ability to focus and to perform under pressure, and the ability to be a part of a team, to me is always number one, right? Like my boys who are 4 and 6, I don't know what kind of athletes they'll be. I don't care. But I want them to play sports and to enjoy sports so they'll get those life lessons. And I do think that I developed my self-determination and self kind of focus over time. I read books about it. I tried to study other great athletes. But I think that for everyone, it's going to look a little different. And for me, the biggest issue I would have sometimes was that if I made a mistake, I might get down on myself. And I was very self-critical. And I could spend a whole game replaying that mistake in my head. I can tell you right now mistakes I made my sophomore year in college. Right? I can tell you the play, the down, the distance, everything. That's the kind of self-critical personality I have. But at the same time, I also knew that was counterproductive. It wasn't helping me perform. And you can really only focus on one thing at a time. You can only have one main focus at a time. And I really mean that. When somebody tells me, I'm so committed to this, I'll say, well, what else is going on in your life? We'll see how committed you are, right? Look at how you spend your time, and that'll probably tell you what you're most committed to, And I developed this ability to really focus in on just myself. On, okay, like what would it look like if I'm the best version of me today? If I'm the best in the workout room, if I'm the best in the lunchroom, if I treat the trainers the best, and what would it look like if I eat the best in this meal? Even though I'd like to have a burger and fries, what would it look like if I had, the grilled chicken and broccoli, right? And I established this kind of internal competition where it was like, well, how good can we get? And I always felt like at the end of training camp, there was this thing called the Grim Reaper, who for us, it was always our strength coach, Coach Coach Waters, who would go around and tell guys, get your playbook and go see Coach Fisher.
Yeah, we saw that on Hard Knocks sometimes when players are finding out that that might be the end of their journey.
Yeah. And I mean, listen, a lot of good guys are going to get cut every year. Mm-hmm. And people who shouldn't get cut are going to be cut. And, we call them the Grim Reaper, but it's really not the end, right? A lot of those guys will get picked up by someone else and play better anyway, But every year I'd see some of my teammates and friends trying to hide out from. I'm like, listen, I'm going to sit right here in my locker. I'm going to be smiling. I'm going to be doing what I need to be doing for whatever's my task that day. And if he comes to get me, that's fine. I've done everything I can do. And I would go into the day feeling like whatever happens, I'm fine. And that's really helped me in everything else. Even in my last selection, I have a little, not diary, but kind of journal entry day 4. So, whatever happens, I did everything I could and I'm fine. And people ask me all the time, how are you doing? I'm like, I'm fine. Listen, I'm tougher than this, and I'm mentally tough enough to handle disappointment, but it was something that I had to develop. And I do think the young men in particular, have to learn to develop that so you don't go into a tailspin, because you can. And I've had that happen when I was younger, but it's ultimately, it's not going to help you. And I promise you, you are tougher than whatever you're going through.
Yeah.
And do you feel like
that? No, I was going to say that's a transition. Yeah. I know Gevin wants to ask you about that.
Yeah. I mean, before I do, I just wanted to ask you one more question there. I mean, do you feel like, I remember I heard you say during one of your interviews, essentially paraphrasing here, you were undrafted, you don't have an ego, and so I'm wondering if you feel like some of these lessons that you learned along the way, the toughness, the humility, all of that, do you feel like you were actually in a better position to learn that earlier on because you came into the NFL with such low expectations, honestly?
Well, I think honestly it's just life, right? I was probably what you would call undrafted in life as well. I was raised by a single mom and with not a lot of money. It was teacher, never met my father. The circumstances were not those that you would predict would have the outcome that I've had so far. And I do think that has made me more resilient and tougher than most other people, and I know that. I know that about myself, and that's one. If I'm a humble person, but when people ask me what's your best trait, I'll say it's my determination. Mm-hmm. I'm more determined than the other guy, right? In sports, I felt like that showed up best in grinding it out through training camp, a 6-week process in which every day matters. Back then, we used to do 2-a-days. I made the team by playing everything. I played inside linebacker, outside linebacker, special teams. I'd go get the water if you wanted me to get the water. I don't care. I make myself so valuable. They'd be like, well, Allred's dumb and slow, but we can't get rid of him. You know what I mean? And that was my approach was, well, who are you going to find is going to do all this, right? And I do think that humility is a big part of it, though. And I want to say that because I played with so many people who, for whatever reason, would get the opinion that they're special, and some of them were, right? I played with Randy Moss, right? Chris Johnson, John Curse, Vince Young, right?
Vince Young, right? Eric Collins, yeah.
They were special. But the guys who I saw who were really special, really, really all-timers, like Troy Polamalu, they were the ones who, they didn't have an ego about it. And they went about their business. They were the best, in some cases, that had ever done it. But they treated everybody around them well. Gevin, I served with John Lewis. And you remember, anywhere he went, right? He couldn't go anywhere. Because everybody would stop and want to take pictures.
Oh, yeah.
Want to do a selfie. Want to tell him how important he was to their life. If you walk around with Mr. Lewis, which I've do, he came to campaign with me, but also after I got to know him in Congress, he could barely walk 5 steps without being stopped, right?
Yeah, that's right.
His whole life was like that. You would think that at some point you could get the big head and be like, "Oh, I'm so great, I'm so grand." That's why everybody comes up to me. And he was the most humble human being that I've ever met. And I'll never forget, these examples that you come across of men in particular who have handled their talent, what they've done, and they've handled it in a way that inspires you to understand that number one, act like you've been there before, right? You're not so special, but also remember that interaction you're having with somebody else might be the only interaction they ever have with you. And make sure that when they leave you, they feel good about it.
Correct.
I appreciate you saying.
I saw that with President Obama when I served
President Obama in the White House. I mean, same thing. Every time we would go on the road, every time that he was behind the scenes, he would make a point of same thing. Like if he saw the servers at the event, he would go into the kitchen and he would say hi to them, thank them for their for what they were doing. He saw people, and he was president of the United States, and he still made time to talk to people and stop, say hello, be polite. And that was a real lesson to me when I was running. Doesn't matter. There's no reason not to be humble. There's no reason not to be grateful to the people who.
What you're going to lose? Yeah, what you got to lose by treating somebody well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Remember, every morning Congressman Lewis would come in the office and greet all of us, shake our hands, greet us, and that was so rare. And I think in this era, in our politics in particular, we don't hear these sorts of stories enough, because you turn on the news, you see what happened in Washington on a given day. Humility is nowhere to be found in any of that. It's all ego. It's all me. It's all theater. It's all entertainment. It's all show. And so I think it's really important that we talk about these stories.
Yeah. I mean, John Lewis is a founding father. Whatever you want to call it. He is a founding father of this country. And that's how he treated people. So you can treat somebody well too.
Right. Yeah. So this is a good transition. We're talking about ego and politics and what we're seeing today. You, however, chose to enter the political fray coming out of your playing career. And I think what's funny is that you probably wouldn't be sitting here as former Congressman and potentially future Senator Colin Allred had you had some 15, 20-year career in the league. And I personally think that's something that we can all relate to. I can definitely relate to it. I think there have been a lot of moments in my own life when something hasn't worked out. There's been a door that's closed, and it's not until later that I realize that door had to close so that another one could open, and so that I could then walk through that one. And it's always 10 times better than the other door that I thought I was supposed to walk through the first time, but you never know in the moment that it's going to be like that when that first door closes. And so can you take us back to that transition when your NFL career ended, when that door closed? What was it that propelled you then into the next phase of your career and led that next door, law and politics, to open?
Yeah, there's a quote, and I forget who said it, that, an athlete dies twice, right? Once when their career ends and once when they actually die. And it is a loss because I played 3 sports in high school. I played football through college, obviously, and then played 5 years professionally. So by the time my football career came to an end with an injury, as much as I tried not to, that was my identity. That was how I saw myself. It's how people saw me, right? Was as an athlete, football player, whatever, but certainly as an athlete. And, it always hurts when it's not on your own terms. For me, in my 5th year, my 5th game against the Cowboys in Dallas, as a Dallas guy, it's a big deal. My family was there. I'd been having issues with my neck, what we call stingers, but really is nerve damage. It's when the nerves running out of your neck are being pinched by something, by a certain movement, and you lose feeling. Or in some cases, for me, it was much worse. I wish I had lost feeling. It was like being electrocuted. And I made a tackle on Marion Barber on a running play. Ellis Bennett was blocking me at the time, and my head was in an awkward position. It wasn't a big hit. It was a normal play, and it just destroyed my entire right side of my body. I really couldn't move my upper body on the right side. I was lying on the turf, and I just knew my career was over because I knew I was going to have surgery. Linebacker with a bad neck is kind of like a pianist with a bad hand. It's just not going to work. Right. And I had been understanding that, with this, especially with the neck injury, that it was a serious one. And I knew it was a serious one. And so I had, surgery. You can see my scar here, and was recovering and decided to reapply to law school because my law school had University of California had let me defer for my first 3 years, but then they said, okay, just reapply when you're done. So I reapplied, and I was probably not as fully prepared as I thought I was for transitioning out of football. For the first few years out of it, I felt like a panther among people. I was not like other people. I had tuned my body, but also my mind to like a level of hyper focus and also just reaction that was not necessary in the outside world, really. And I had to kind of reintegrate myself into society. Because I also, when you're an athlete at that level, people are also doing many things for you, right? Your clothing is provided for you, not your day-to-day clothing, like everything. What you wear all day is going to be team issued. What you wear all weekend is going to be team issued, right? Your travel is all done by someone else, right? Your meals are done by someone else, and all of a sudden you have 53 guys around you. You have a coaching staff of 20 or so, and support staff more, and then all of a sudden you're on your own, and there's no agent, and it's kind of like there's so much noise, and then it's quiet. and I think that transition for me, I also learned something about myself. And what really kind of brought me back into life was I got an internship in the White House counsel's office with Kathy Rumler and some great lawyers there who I'm still friends with. And I went there. This is my second year in law school, and I went there and thought, public service is a noble thing. I didn't think I'd run for office. I thought I'd just be in government. And I thought, public service is a noble thing, and you can help people. And I knew I wanted to do civil rights law, but I thought this is interesting. And so I've been veering more towards voting rights because I felt like everything was derived from the right to vote. Whether it was civil rights, whether it was obviously political power, but just everything was derived from the vote. And in Texas, they were making it harder for folks to vote. And I've as somebody who likes to take on tough fights, I thought, well, that's a fight I'd like to take on.
Some good trouble.
But in the back of my mind, I knew service might be a part of it. And so I was doing civil rights work, and I went to DOJ for a little while, and then was doing civil rights work in Texas, and got a call from a guy I'd worked with when I was interning there, who's now then the deputy White House counsel, who asked me to go to HUD, and went to HUD, and served with Julian Castro there, and then the administration ended.
And urban development. The housing urban development under Secretary Castro. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then the administration ended. The new administration came in. I was part of the transition. I wrote my memos, and there were not as many people left to kind of do that transition, but we did our best, and I think we handed them off a very stable government that was soon to be destabilized. My wife and I were moving back to Dallas, and there was a congressman there in the district where I was born and raised, literally the hospital I was born in, the high school I went to, who had been there for 22 years, had been unopposed in the previous election. Like, no Democrat was on the ballot, right? He got 75% of the vote, which is actually not that good when you're unopposed, but and I thought he didn't match the community that I knew. And I thought that he'd gotten lazy, thought that he took the position for granted.
Mm-hmm.
He was one of these people who didn't do town halls, or if he did do them, he just yelled at his constituents the whole time. And I thought, somebody should run against him. And then looking around, I thought, well, I guess I'll do it. I'd never run for office. I had not planned on running for office at that stage, but I thought it was one of the more important elections in American history, and I think it did turn out to be. And we beat this guy who nobody thought we could beat. It's not a race that people had been predicting, by nearly 7 points. And we smoked.
Right. A lot of people told you that you were an underdog, that you'd have no chance in that race, right?
I remember doing an interview with Politico like a week before the election, being like, explain to us why you think we can win this. I'm like, I'm not just thinking. This election, we have early voting. I'm like, this election's over. Like, you just don't know it yet, right? Yeah. No, it was one of those. It wasn't really looked for. But again, it was one of those things where I had to learn what my job was. I had to build a good team around me, and it took some time to get the right team in place. But then once we had that, it was just off to the races, and it was trying to basically make sure people knew who I was, draw the contrast, of course, with my opponent, but it wasn't about him. I never really felt that way. I felt like it was, about me being the best version of myself, but also talking about what this community had meant for me and what we could do together if we had leadership that understood that.
Yeah. Well, and then you took it on again. As somebody who's run for office myself, I know that, again, there are some highlights, certainly, and I found it incredible to get to run for office and to meet people and to talk about the issues in my community that mattered. At the same time, what people don't see are some of those lowlights where you're like eating cold pizza over the sink at 9 p.m. Or at least I was. You probably have more discipline than I do. But when I've been campaigning for 12, 14 hours, I would just eat what I could that was in the house, and then I would go to bed and wake up to it the next day. But you chose to take another risk and run for Senate. And so, tell us a little bit about that, and feel free to make any announcements you want to make right here on the Lowlights podcast about your future.
Well, listen, I think when you believe in public service and you believe in serving folks, you kind of see running for office differently than somebody who's just running to get their name in the paper, right? Like,
yeah,
I've already had my name in the paper. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like my whole life, I've had my name. I don't need it. I'm fine. I mean, if anybody who knows me personally would tell you that I am perfectly fine just spending time with my family and doing what I normally do. But that I felt like I had a tough re-election because when you win a seat that they thought you couldn't win, you're then the top target in the next election.
Yeah.
They couldn't beat me, so they redistricted my district and made it into a very packed district. This is what they do in Texas. It's called gerrymandering. They pack and crack, which means
in Georgia too.
Yeah, and they do. And you pack voters into these districts, and then you crack others so that, a city like Dallas, which probably would have 5 Democratic members of Congress, has 3. And that's kind of the way they maintain, in Texas, the numbers that they do, despite it not being reflective of the entire state. But so, I knew that the district was basically one now that where previously I was the only one who could have won it, then anyone could, right? The Democratic nominee would win, right, after me. And I just felt really strongly that Ted Cruz was a terrible senator and that he was that he was not in public service.
Yeah. No argument here.
Right. And listen, I do mean this. I really do mean this. I have ideological differences with people who I don't think are terrible at what their job is. I have Republican colleagues who I disagree with on many things, who I don't think are terrible at doing their job. I think they're representing their community to the best of their ability, consistent with their beliefs.
Yeah, that's important.
And then there's another classification of public servants, so to speak, who are not representing their community to the best of their ability, consistent with their beliefs, but who are cynical and who draw upon and use the divisions in society and in our country to make themselves more famous, richer, personally richer. Because as I said during our debate, Ted Cruz likes to do something called angertainment, where he podcasts and goes on TV, gets people angry about something, then he writes a book about it and he makes money on it, right?
He's still doing that.
He's still doing it. But it's all about them. It's not about the people they're serving.
Right. It's not, and it's supposed to be public service. It's not that.
It's supposed to be public service. It's not about you. And in a team, especially in football, we can't stand those guys. We would call them me guys, right? It was the me guy. There are guys like that who play in the league, and you see them. They bounce around, even though they're really talented. They can't stay on a team, and everybody's like, "Why can't they stay on a team?" It's because they're terrible in the locker room, right? Because they're a cancer on the team, and the coaching staff and the players themselves will often say, "Please don't re-sign this guy." Yes, I know he's a 1,000-yard receiver, but he's not helping us win, right? I'd rather get 700 out of somebody else who's going to be a part of the whole team, right? And Ted Cruz was the ultimate me guy, in my opinion, And so it was one of those things where I always knew it was an uphill race. We haven't won a statewide race in Texas in 30 years. But I also knew that he needed to be held accountable for what he'd done, from going to Cancun to trying to overturn the election, right, to spending his time in the Senate passing basically a handful of legislation, no accomplishments to speak of, no legislative accomplishments. The only thing he had accomplished was, leading, I guess you could say, the culture war, and being somebody who had given up all of his values that he previously espoused to Donald Trump. And so, I decided to run against him, knowing it was an uphill battle. I'm proud of the race that we ran, and I'm proud of some of the issues that we highlighted, particularly what's been happening in Texas regarding this abortion ban that's killing Texas women and making it difficult for Texas men.
Absolutely. So important for men to speak up about that as well. Well, all right. I know that our time with you, Colin, is running short. So we do have a few final questions. Some of these will be sort of lightning round, but I'll ask the first one, which is, as you know, part of the idea of Gevin and I doing this podcast is that we want to speak to young men. We want to, we know that, and polls tell us and studies tell us that a lot of young men are really struggling right now. And that's not the only people we want to listen to the podcast and watch us, but we definitely want to talk to them as well. And do you have any, have you seen this in your own life that young men are struggling? And do you have any sort of advice? I mean, you've certainly shared some in this interview, but do you have any advice to the young men who are listening to us right now who might be struggling and might be wondering about how to overcome challenges in a healthy way in their life?
I think young men are in crisis in this country. I think the data supports that, but also, I've seen it just in my own life. Young men who, within a family, you have a daughter and a son, and the daughter is outperforming the son significantly. Yeah. And I think that this is across racial groups. This is not specific to one racial group, and it's a problem. And I've got two sons, and so I spend a lot of my time now thinking about it because I also am very aware of the manosphere that's out there. And I think that when you're in crisis, you can often look to examples of how to get out of crisis, and those examples can sometimes lead you in the exact opposite direction of what's best for you and your family. And that's what I see from these folks who I think are trying to take advantage of young men to try and get attention for themselves. And so, I don't have like just one piece of advice, but what I always tell young men when they ask me, how did you get where you are? I said, well, just be the hardest worker in the room. I mean, and this is the one thing you can control, right? You can't control what's around you. You can't control if the system's set up for you. I think in many cases, our K through 12 education system makes it harder for young boys from the very beginning. Mm-hmm. My sons are not going to be as good at certain fine motor skills early on, oftentimes as some of the young girls in their class, because they're not as physically developed yet. Their hand-eye coordination. If that translates into grades, then you can see someone thinking, well, maybe I'm not smart. This is one of the paths that we have seen, research has shown, begins early, right? But the one thing you can control is how hard you work. And if you're the hardest worker in the room, nobody's ever going to hold you at anything but high regard, right? Even if you're not good at what you're working hard at. They'll say, Gevin, he's not good at this at all, but damn it, he worked his tail off, right? He just
would say that to me all the time.
That's exactly how I feel. No.
You'll never regret. And you'll never regret working hard on something. You'll never regret it. You'll never look back and say, dang, I wish I hadn't worked hard on that. You just never will. But you will regret, and you will look back on things and say, I know I could have done better. Yeah. And that's what I always tell you.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I mean, every time, when I'm looking to hire somebody for a campaign, I want everybody wants to be a political strategist. Everybody wants to tell you what they think. But what I'm looking for is the person who wants to stay late at the end of the day and like clean up the office kitchen. The person who wants to stay late and cut those extra canvas packets, to show where the field organizers are going to go the next day. The work that people don't see, but is so vital to the campaign. It sounds like exactly what you're talking about. People who want to do the work, I always look for them because no matter what we're doing, whether it's politics, sports, you name it, that's somebody I want on my team.
And they'll probably end up being better at it, even if it wasn't their talent didn't exactly run in that direction.
Yeah. All right. So the final questions. Favorite movie or TV show about sports, about football, baseball, my first love. It sounds like maybe your first love. You name it.
Remember the Titans is my favorite sports movie, but also favorite movie. But I just really love the first Creed movie too. And there's a line in there.
It's so good.
Yeah. There's a line in there that reminds me of what I used to tell myself. Rocky's talking to Adonis Creed, Apollo's son, right? And he's telling him, one step at a time, one round at a time, one punch at a time. Don't think about the whole picture. Break it down into each segment. But then he also says, it's you versus you, right? It's not you versus him. He's just in your way. Get him out of your way, right? And that's the truth, man. I'm telling you, like it's boxing, it's politics, it's football. It's just the truth. It's you versus you.
Right. Yo, Adonis, you gotta focus one round at a time. Yeah.
That's right.
That's great. Okay, Colin, what music or musical artist do you listen to when you're down?
Well, as you can probably tell, I don't dwell when I'm I see it, I recognize it, and I try to put it to another side. Especially when you got kids, you don't have time to just sit around and be down. But listen, I love black church music, and you always will catch me listening to like some Marvin Sapp or something like that. I never would have made it because I know what I've been through. I know what I've come from, and I have to be thankful for how far I've already come, And I do think that sometimes a little bit of church can remind you of that, right? Listen, you're already fortunate. You've already made it. You're already doing so well, right? And you can't sit there and wallow.
Never would have made it.
Yeah,
This podcast is for Gevin to launch his musical career. Actually, that's really what we're building to.
yeah. I've
That
seen
will
him
never
sing.
happen.
Yeah, I've seen him
It's
sing
such a
live a couple times, and he's
such an
even better
important,
live.
yeah, such an important reminder
I
to
went
just
to a
get.
Richard Smallwood tribute concert back in
Okay.
like December. Oh, it was amazing. It was amazing.
Hmm.
He was there. He was
Yeah, I
there.
bet.
So
Yeah.
powerful.
Okay, and then
Dave just wouldn't get it.
yeah, you did.
That's okay.
No, but it's true. I mean,
You
look,
know
I'm
what, Dave?
Jewish.
Put it on,
I
though.
go to
Put it
synagogue, and I
on,
need,
though. And see
you know,
what happens, too.
to reset, right? Yeah. No, I've got the chance to go to some incredible churches with some of the people I've worked for. Yes, you come out of there
Yeah,
feeling
exactly.
counting your
You can't
blessings
leave.
instead of mourning the what you don't have.
No, you're not leaving black church with your head down. No.
No,
That's
absolutely
right.
not. Absolutely
Dave
not.
was up there pulling a Joe Biden.
Okay, and then if you allow yourself it sounds like you challenge yourself to be a healthy eater, but if you allow yourself some comfort food, when you're struggling, or it sounds like you don't wallow in struggling too much. But what's your comfort food? What's something you turn to make you feel good?
Oh, man. I mean, I make my own guacamole, and like, that's a Texas thing, you know. My family's from South Texas, like my mom. Everybody else just doesn't make it right, you know. So, like, there's no
Any
point in
secrets?
ordering it.
Any secrets that you can let us in on?
Right.
I mean, it's just fresh ingredients. Like, it's
Yeah.
not, it's not rocket science, but you do just have to, everything has to be fresh. You got to cut it yourself. You got to have your own lime juice, fresh limes, right?
Yep.
You know, fresh avocados. If you like tomatoes, probably cherry tomatoes, dice those up. You know,
You're
add
okay with
some
tomatoes?
cilantro. Yeah. So, I mean, if you like that, I'm not always, cilantro, but it has to be fresh, and then season the hell out of it, you know?
Another thing Dave wouldn't understand.
Erroneous.
Jokes.
So I love that. And it's also very meditative to be chopping your own vegetables and stuff.
Mm-hmm. This has been such an honor. Thank you so much, Colin, for coming on, for taking the time, for sharing some insight. You know, this is a moment of crisis for young men in particular, in this country. And it's so just, we're just so grateful that you're in this fight, that you're leading this fight, and that you're, presenting a different vision of what manhood can be and what service can be, and how to serve your community.
And
Thank
Dave
you.
and I are very excited to see what your next step in this fight is.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Well, thank you all. I appreciate you, and this is a great podcast to be doing. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks,
All right,
Colin.
thank you so much.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks.
All right, and we're back. This
Back.
that was a great interview. I hope folks agree. And so this is now the third segment of our show. We're in what we call the spotlight, where we reflect on the interview, and spotlight any things that the guest said that we think were particularly notable. So Gevin, I'll give you the first shot. Any takeaways? Any big takeaways from the interview?
Well, Dave, I know you really tried hard to get Colin to announce some very special news.
I did. Going into it, I said, because we'd seen on Twitter that he'd gotten into a little bit of back and forth with some U.S. senator from Texas, and so I gave him the opportunity to make any announcements about any future Senate candidacies on the Lowlights podcast, and he. Credit to him, he declined. But
credit to you, you tried.
Yeah, exactly right. Mm-hmm. Credit to both of us.
Yeah. Well, Dave, I think one thing that stuck out to me, and this came up toward the end of the interview, and we asked him our, 3 lightning round rapid fire questions about, what music he listens to when he gets down, what food he eats, all of that. And one thing I remember he said was that he doesn't really, get down, doesn't really let himself get down. And I don't know how you feel, but I kind of feel conflicted about that, right? Because I feel like on one hand, as guys, we're trained to not let ourselves get sad or get down. And I think we're conditioned that way from a really young age. And the danger there is we can sometimes take that too far, and that we don't let ourselves actually feel what we're feeling. And I think sometimes those emotions can get bottled up, and one day, and it's like, they can explode.
Yeah.
Right. But so I think that's harmful. But on the other hand, obviously wallowing too much in, our present circumstances can be bad too. So my question is like, where do you draw the line? And how do you balance
Yeah.
admitting that it's okay to get down when things don't work out while also making sure that you don't let yourself stay down? And my guess is that it's probably just part of that like pro athletes mindset. And, despite the fact that we were both standout college intramural athletes, maybe, maybe we just don't get it. So I don't know. What do you think?
Excuse me. I was co-captain of my high school baseball team.
Well, I'll have you know that I won Athlete of the Year for my residential college. So.
I think you're right. I think part of it is there are those special people, particularly pro athletes, where Colin Allred. He was fairly humble about himself, but Colin Allred is a legendary. Texas is a place that has legendary athletes, right? And here he was a legendary high school baseball player and a legendary high school football player in Texas, which is already like in most states the equivalent of college. And then he goes on and he's, the team captain at Baylor and one of the best players at Baylor. And then he makes it to the NFL. I do think you're right. There's something there that there are people who have this incredible leadership trait, to just always focus on the next fight and the game and the next thing ahead of them and not to do too much reflecting about the past. I try to do some of that myself. I try not to let myself really wallow and get down. But I do think it was interesting. Even Colin was saying in that interview that if you asked him about tackles he missed in his sophomore year in college or plays that he should have made in the NFL or whatever, he could name them. And so I think that's part of it too, is that a lot of us just have to find a way of achieving a healthy balance, I think, is the reality. Because, when you mess up, when you're like in a play and you forget a line, when you're playing a game and a ball goes in your glove or you strike out, or you miss a shot in basketball, whatever, like you're going to remember it. And I think that the key is, I think one of the things I love about sports is that you can have those highs and those lows, but if you have good teammates and you have good coaches and you have a good support network around you, you learn that like your life will go on, like whatever happens at the end of the day, like your family still loves you, your friends still love you. Like, you have people around you who are there because they support you, not just because they want to, they want a specific outcome in a game. So I think you're right. It's something to think about. And I think it's a good goal to have, to not let yourself get down and not just dwell on, lowlights from your past. But I think that there's a balance there that most people live with.
And I think you're so right in extending that beyond sports, because obviously a lot of us can relate to the sports context when you miss a shot or, you strike out. But like you said, it could be, you forget your lines, or it could be that, you forget to turn in a homework assignment on time, or you fail a class, so you have to retake that class, or, you go out for a job interview and you don't get the job, or you get fired from a job, or, anything like that. Right. So I do think that it's important, to just take these lessons from Colin as, for him, it was during his sports career, but I think we can all relate to exactly what he's talking about, whether it's in sports, whether it's, in the classroom, whether it's on stage, or whether it's in just like our personal, relationships and friendships. So.
Yeah. It reminds me too, there was advice that somebody gave about like most people, I think, consider themselves some version of a perfectionist.
Yeah.
Or at least most people I know.
Yeah.
And they said the warning they gave about that was like, if your standard for yourself is perfection, then you're setting yourself up to be disappointed, because what that means is you don't give yourself any credit for the things that you do right, because that's just your expectation. You're like, no, that's the baseline. I should be perfect at all times and everything. And then anything that falls short of perfection, well, that's terrible. That's a failure. And so I think they made a good point, which was, you really need to think about what standard you're setting. You want to set high standards, you want to achieve, you want to do all that. That's all great. But just really think about like what message you're sending yourself and how you're talking to yourself in your head. And I think that's advice I've tried to keep with me, because like you can attest firsthand, Gevin, I did not write perfect speeches. Not every word that I wrote was a gem. And that's true in every facet of our lives. Like we never say the perfect thing every time. And so you just got to learn to live with that.
And the last thing I want to say on that before we move on to, your observation, or your spotlight, is that I think as human beings and as guys especially, we have this natural inclination to want to hold on to the losses and to hold on to the
for
failures
sure.
as little as
Mhm.
they might be. Like Colin said, a missed tackle from back in his high school or college days. But
Yeah.
I don't think we do enough to celebrate the little wins. And we accumulate little wins every single day. And it might just be getting out of bed in the morning when we don't want to. And, going to class, going to school, going to work, getting a good report from a boss, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Those are little wins, and I think we underweigh those things and we overweigh when we mess up. And so I think it's important for us to just build each other up, build ourselves up, and make sure that we're not like, as much as we want to talk about the lowlights and learn from those things, that we also celebrate the highlights. They might be small, but we need to celebrate the little wins.
Yeah.
I think athletes do that all the time too.
I think that's exactly right. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. You will, it's funny. And this is true across, I've heard that, I think they reference this in the movie Rounders with Matt Damon and Ed Norton. Great film. But they
That might be
reference,
before my time.
oh
I'm
my
a
goodness
young
gracious.
man, remember?
As am I. I'm
Okay.
still like young professionals.
Okay. Yeah,
Events.
right.
It's the last one that I can cling on to.
I know how old you turned last year, Dave.
Oh my gosh. I turned 29 and just stopped. Every year I keep turning 29. No, but like they say that card players, like great, like professional poker players, they can tell you with like shocking accuracy the bad beats in their life when they lost on some final card. And yet, like, their big wins, they often are just like, yeah, I don't really remember that. Like, I guess that's right. I guess I won that hand, but I don't really, the thing that sticks with them are those losses. And, it's like, I mean, as a baseball guy, as somebody who grew up playing so much baseball, early on, people told me, like, just remember, like, the best baseball players ever, they still got out like 60% of the time, 65% of the time, even in their best seasons. And so you have to just like understand that that's part of the game. You just have to appreciate that and understand that, right? Like the best shooters of all time, Steph Curry, he's still missing a huge percentage of his shots, even though he's Steph Curry, he's incredible. He hits, more threes than anybody ever. But yet he's still, he's not perfect either. So yeah, but I think you're absolutely right, Gevin. Like you really have to focus on wins and stop.
Yeah.
I mean, cliches are cliches for a reason. It's like stop seeing things as glass half empty and like really do think about glass half full. You really do have to like reorient that. So anyway, all right.
I think you want to talk about some of his movie references.
Oh yeah, well, so I love the movie Creed. I love the Rocky movies, and I thought Creed 1 was so good and like did such a good job of building on the story without trying to just be like a remake.
Totally.
And one thing that I love that Colin talked about was how, you really like, it's easy in the NFL and in life to get distracted and worry about like, what's this other guy doing? He's coming for my job. What am I going to do about this? What am I going to do about that? And that in the movie, one of the big lessons that Apollo has to learn early on is like, you got to just foot like one round at a time, one punch at a time, take it one step at a time. And, I think that's actually something that I noticed in my career and have noticed in sports as well, is just, you really do just need to tune that out. Like when I was running for Congress, not that I did it as successfully as Colin did, but when I was running for Congress in 2020 in Massachusetts, it was a big crowded primary field. There were a bunch of other candidates in the race. And it was tempting at times to go on and be like, well, what are they saying about this? Should I be doing a press release about that? Well, I don't know. Like, like when we'd be in a debate, it would be easy to be like, oh, well, they mentioned this. That's like, I should have mentioned that. Like, why didn't I mention? But actually, the reality is like, you gotta run your race. You gotta do what makes sense for you. You gotta, in speech writing, one of my favorite pieces of advice is like, the best speeches are given, by, and can only be given by that person at that time in that place, right? Like, you can't just like Barack Obama, everybody acknowledges, great speaker. But like if you or I picked up his speech and started reading it, it would sound weird because like you and I weren't born in Hawaii and we like didn't represent the great state of Illinois in the Senate, right? Like
I would love to hear you give his race speech, Dave.
No, exactly. Like it would be weird. You can't do that. But in the same way that like, our former boss, Vice President Kamala Harris, she's an incredible speaker too. But like, she couldn't, just as Barack Obama couldn't read her speech, because it wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't sound right. So I think that
Yeah.
it is so important to just like try as much as you can to tune out that noise and that nonsense and focus on, what you can control, which is often not the end result, right? Like you can't decide like, oh, is this speech that we're writing right now going to get this bill passed? All you
Yeah.
can decide is, are the facts in here accurate? Are we making
Yeah.
the best argument that we can? Is the principal
Exactly.
happy with it? Does she like it? Like, is she
Yeah.
ready to deliver this? Is this how she wants to make this argument? And then, the rest of it, you got to hope is going to take care of itself, or you got to trust your teammates, right? Like in the
Yeah.
White House, that could be the intergovernmental affairs team. It could be the
Policy
people who are,
team.
the policy team who are going to work to make sure that we could get that legislation through Congress or
Mhm.
whatever. Like, you
Yeah.
got to just focus on controlling what you can control, I think is one of the big lessons that reminded me of when he said that.
And that's what we're trying to do with this podcast too. We can only control what we can control. And we're just trying to have fun, right? And take it one episode at a time.
Yeah,
One
exactly.
conversation at a time and one segment at a time.
That's right. So, and then I know the one other thing you wanted to spotlight is,
Yeah.
you also, in politics worked for, Congressman John Lewis, a
I
hero
did.
of
Yeah.
most of ours,
Yeah.
an American hero, an icon.
Yeah.
So any takeaways from that?
Yeah. No, thanks. I mean, I loved that Colin brought up John Lewis, and I guess they served in Congress together for a little bit, and I can't imagine.
Wild.
I can tell you what it was like to intern in Congressman Lewis's office. I cannot imagine what it was like to call Congressman Lewis a colleague.
Yeah.
But let me just, they don't make them like John Lewis anymore. And
Mhm.
actually, a funny story was that I met him for the first time in Costco when I was in 5th grade, and I was with my mom, and it was little Gevin, and I was just walking around with my mom. And my mom pointed out a guy who was shopping in the aisle near us, and she told me to go up
Of course he
Yeah.
was.
and she told me to go up and thank that man, shake his hand. But again, thank him for what he had done for me, and I had no idea who this guy was.
Yeah, right.
It's just like bald, older black dude, and I'm like, okay. I go up, I shake his hand. I did what I was told. I was very obedient. Shook his hand and
Yeah, right.
thanked him for what he had done for me. My mom talked to him and talked to the staffer who was with him, and didn't really know what they were talking about. And in the car, I found out who this guy was, and she explained to me the sacrifices that he had made so that I could be where I was and do the things that I was doing. And she arranged for me and some of my friends of all races to go in and meet with him in his office, and he showed us the pictures from Bloody Sunday, and he told us about the laws that were on the books that prevented black people from voting, the literacy tests that were in place where black people had to be counting up bubbles on the soap bar and all sorts of other things that nobody could do. And then if they couldn't do them, they couldn't vote. So I have those memories. And then to think about then nearly 10 years later, getting the offer to intern in his office was really, really quite special. And I'll tell you, every morning he would come to the office and he would go desk to desk, walking through the office, shaking everyone's hand and telling them good morning. And I remember, and Colin brought this up, I remember escorting the congressman to an interview in the Capitol, and every 5 seconds it felt like we were being stopped in the rotunda or wherever we were. Someone coming up to him, asking for a picture, and he said yes to every single one. And that was John Lewis. He had a way of making everyone feel special. And I feel like for someone like him, he had every reason to be angry and resentful. I mean, you talk about getting beat down. That was John Lewis's experience, literally. But he didn't, the anger that he had was righteous anger, and he challenged it towards making our country better because he saw the best in America. And I always will hear his voice in my head, reminding me to get into good trouble and necessary trouble. And, so I'm just so grateful every day that I got to share in the greatness of such a patriot. So,
Yeah. No, I mean, it's something. So before I was a speechwriter for Vice President Harris. In the Obama administration, I was a speechwriter for President Obama and Mrs. Obama. And, President Obama, one of his most indelible memories, one of the things that he was most honored to be able to do was, as you mentioned, John Lewis was part of that Bloody Sunday march in Selma, Alabama, over the Edmund Pettus Bridge, when he and so many others were beaten simply for trying to exercise their civil rights and their rights to vote. And Barack Obama went back when he was president and marched over that bridge again with thousands of people, including John Lewis. And, then there's that room, in the White House in the executive office building where you can see those photos, right? One next to the other. And it's just a reminder. I mean, President Obama used to say all the time that that it's hard not to believe in the promise of America when you would see what was possible, when you'd lived his life and seen what he'd seen. And I think it's those moments that remind you, like, no matter what it is, right? No matter what that low moment is, no matter what that setback is, there are just so many people who have maintained their sense of optimism and their hope in the future despite setbacks, and often with people telling them, oh, you shouldn't be hopeful anymore. You're naive. You're being silly. You should just accept this failure and understand nothing will ever get better. And the truth is, like, those people are usually wrong. The cynics are usually wrong. And it's the people who remained hopeful and optimistic who, in the long run, are usually proven right. The thing that President Obama always used to say about, the arc of the moral universe being long, but bending toward justice. It's just so true that in the long run, the arc of progress is usually upward. There's some bumps in the road.
Yeah.
There's some moments when that arrow points down.
Mm-hmm.
But in the long term, the trend is usually very good.
Yeah. I mean, President Obama used to talk all the time about not giving into cynicism and hope, such a core part of his message. So
well, I know we got to wrap up.
Yep.
So Gavin, anything else on your mind from that interview?
No, those are mine. Those are my spotlights, Dave. Any others from you?
Well, I want to eat Rep. Colin Allred's guacamole. as soon, I mean, look, you came after me for the food, but I will just say as people, the Jewish people, we are big on spice. We are big on flavor. We are big on good food, no matter where it comes from. And so now that's a new life goal of mine.
So you're saying I won't have to send you a seasoning starter kit?
Not yet.
I will say I have enjoyed the food at many a Passover Seder.
See? There you go. All right. Let's go. One of my favorite meals of the year. All right. That's for a future episode. We can break that down.
Right.
All right. But thank you everybody for tuning in. We're going to try to keep this fun, try to keep it interesting, and hope that, as Gevin said, a lot of you are willing to come along on this journey with us.
Yep.
So
thanks so much. Throw us a like, subscribe.
Do all those things.
Mm-hmm. Do all the things and tell your friends.
And we'll see you next week.
See you next week.